All right, so I'm going to take you through this first stretch. Now, when we do this stretch, I just want you to bear in mind that there's various different ways you can do this stretch. You might have seen me do this stretch in the past, you might have seen somebody else do this stretch in the past, and you might have gone, oh, that's how I do that particular stretch. Honestly, I don't subscribe to there being one way that you should do every stretch, and it should be done that particular way. I take more of a search and destroy approach, where I want you to adjust the variables in the stretch or adjust the stretch that you're doing such that you feel it where you are the tightest. Because where you are the tightest or what lines of tissue might be tightest for you might and is likely very different than what's tightest for me. So if we try and fit everybody into the same box with this particular stretch, certain people aren't going to get the biggest return on investment because they might be tightest in slightly different areas or parts of that tissue. So I want you guys to get really comfortable with the idea of taking a stretch and tweaking it rather than trying to fit yourself into that box or say, oh, well, the stretch is supposed to be done that way, therefore I should be doing it that way. Play with it. There's an art to this stuff, and everybody's bodies is different or are different. So with their stretch, I'm going to give you some options here. When we set this one up, what I'm going to have you do, set your back foot up near a wall if you can. You're going to have that other leg underneath you, so your knee is underneath your hip. So we're going to be stretching our right hip first here. I'm going to swing that hip through into hip external rotation, and then I'm going to drop my other knee down, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scooch back just a touch, kind of maintaining that angle, and I can now use my other foot to lever my hip up into slightly more hip external rotation if I want, okay? Now, if I want my full foot on the wall, I might even just scooch back a little bit more, but kind of maintain that angle of hip rotation. And then once you get here, you've got so many things that you can play with. The biggest one that I think a lot of people are going to get thrown off by is the position of your pelvis. So I can go into anterior pelvic tilt, which would be sticking my butt up in the air and giving myself the classic fitness influencer pose or butt. Or I can go the opposite route and I can kind of either leave it neutral or even go down onto my elbows, which will bias a little bit more posterior tilt. You can go either way, but play with these and go, okay, if I go into anterior pelvic tilt, how does the stretch feel for me there? How does it feel if I go down onto my elbows? Whichever one of those feels tightest for you, go with that. Or train both, even better. Okay? But don't feel like you have to do one or the other, that there's a right and wrong way to do this. That's not the case, at least not in my opinion. Now, the other thing that you can and should play with here is the direction your belly button's pointing. If I have my belly button pointing off towards you, that's typically going to reduce the stretch. If I keep my belly button pointed at the floor or even turn it towards the leg that I'm stretching ever so slightly, you're typically going to grab more tissue and lengthen more stuff when you go that way. The last thing that you can play with is actually, if I shift my weight over to my left leg, that offloads things and it takes the stretch off a little bit. If I shift my weight over to my stretching leg, which right now is my right leg, and I put a little bit more weight through that leg, and I even get myself as light as I can on my left knee, that also increases the stretch. What that's going to do is it's going to bow the head of your femur into the back of your hip, which, like I said, will increase the stretch. Plus, just by you changing your angle a little bit, that also increases the stretch. So play with all of those things and find what feels like your best stretch, but is also not so intense that you can't maintain it for 2 minutes, because I want to keep you here for in and around 2 minutes. So you can play with it. I think what I'm going to do, for sake of showing you guys both, I'm going to do my first one in more of your extended position or anterior pelvic tilt, and I'm going to stay up here on my hands, and then for the second rep, I'm going to come down onto my elbows and go a little bit more posterior tilt and show you guys that one as well. And that's obviously another variable you can play with, which is just by itself being on your hands versus your elbows. Now stay in what feels like your best stretch, and I'm going to talk you through what the isometrics here are going to look like, because we don't want to just take that tissue to length and leave it there, use it or lose it. We're going to teach your body how to produce force here and how to own this position so that it becomes more accessible to you. and so that you kind of hit the save button on that range of motion, so that next time when you come back to this, or just in the future after weeks of doing this, you can just rotate your foot up into that position, or you can just easily access length there with way less effort, and it just becomes your new range of motion. So what the isometrics are going to look like, I'm going to move around here just so you guys can see what's happening. Please stay in your stretch. With your first isometric intent, you're going to be trying to, with your right leg, internally rotate your leg or sweep it through underneath you, but of course your opposite side knee is going to block you there. When you produce force into that opposite thigh, I want you to make sure that your pelvis does not shift around or move around as you do so. When I'm watching you do this, I want it to look like you're a statue. Okay, so I don't want to actually see you moving or shifting around at all. You want to take all that tissue to length and keep it there and load it at length. As soon as you start shifting around, you're going to lose some of that length, and then we lose some of our intent. So make sure you stay in that position the whole time, but you'll be pushing into the opposite knee, trying to rotate your thigh inwards, which will be kicking your foot to the outside. After that, you can probably guess where we're going with this. You're going to throw it in reverse, and you're going to think about trying to get this foot off of this thigh by rotating that hip deeper without your pelvis moving. Because I can make my foot move by moving my pelvis, or I can make my hip move or my foot move by moving my femur, which is what I want. So I want femur moving on pelvis, not pelvis moving at all. And that's a common theme, as you're going to see if you're in Operation Human First, in this entire class series, but also in this class alone. Try to stabilize the pelvis, move the femur on the pelvis, or we've flipped it on its head in certain other exercises and certain other classes, and we have a stable femur, and then we're moving our pelvis on our femur. For this one, stable pelvis, only the thigh bone is attempting to move. You're probably not actually going to move at all if you're in range of motion. So you've been there for in and around 2 minutes. Like I said, I'm going to bias a little bit more towards extension on this one. I'm still going to say turn towards that side a little bit. But now we're all going to start our first isometric input. So you're going to start pressing your foot into your opposite thigh as if trying to spin your thigh inwards with just 20% effort to start. Make your way up to 40. Keep climbing 60. Give me 80. And then your greatest, safest, pain-free effort. This is uncomfortable. We're going to hold it for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Get ready to throw it in reverse. 2, 1. Now you're attempting to pull your foot off of your thigh by spinning your thigh outwards. Again, as much as you can without pain, but you're trying not to shift around at all. You're trying not to move through that pelvis. You're trying to keep everything still, and you're just thinking spin your thigh, spin your thigh, spin your thigh. Get your foot lighter and lighter and lighter on that thigh for another 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. Now, if you manage to lift off, what you're going to want to do is set up a little deeper in that stretch for the next one. So you then shift yourself so that you're in a little bit more external rotation for that next setup. Now for me, again, just so that you guys can see both kind of pelvis positions or variations for this exercise, I'm going to come down onto my elbows, and I'm going to do my next round here. Now, same exact intent, despite being down on my elbows, I'm trying to think spin my thigh outwards, or inwards technically on the first one. So spin my foot out to the outside, and then we're going to reverse and think pull your foot up and in by spinning your thigh out. Now we're not going to keep you here too long. We're going to get right into it. If you need more time, please hit pause and take that time for yourself. So from here, we're going to think 20% effort, pressing our right foot into our left thigh, trying to rotate our hip. Work your way up to 40%. Keep climbing 60%. 80%, and your greatest, safest, pain-free effort, and hold that. Do not let up. I know this is hard. I'm here with you. Keep going. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Throw it in reverse and think make that right foot lighter on your left thigh, but do not let your pelvis move. Maintain that pelvis still in space, You're contracting all this stuff that externally rotates your hip, and you're holding for another 4, 3, 2, 1, and then slowly relax, but do not leave the position. Give your body a little bit of time to adapt, and then you can slowly make your way out of it.